I don't want this video to be scripted. I feel like as soon as I start writing a script, yes, it becomes a lot more cohesive. But I want this video to feel more natural. I want this video to feel like these are my genuine thoughts, my genuine opinions on Path of Exile. I don't have to write it in a script and read it out to you like some sort of robot. There's a couple of things I want to talk about in this video, but first, for my current viewers, those of you waiting on the Summoner Sniper build, it's on its way. It's just no longer basic or budget, so it's proving a lot more difficult to set up than I thought, but it is an incredible damage increase. It is big, but I'm just not there yet. It's very expensive. Those of you waiting on the lightning arrow build, well, that's even further away now because I've just redid the whole build from the ground up today because of this one comment telling me that Simulacrum is the hardest area in the game, and that has sparked this entire video. I've recently watched a video by Ben, and I recently watched a video of Lily reacting to Ben, but I do think a lot of his points I disagree with, but I also agree with a lot of his points. He did go over something I also talked about in my Endgame video, about mana being a ridiculous issue in this game. The mana costs get out of control. It definitely needs to be toned down. And interesting, he also talked about sockets, which isn't something I actually talked about. But, you know, to get a level 21 skill gem, you're looking at spending several divine per chance. I think it's probably like 3 divine per chance. And then you go ahead and corrupt it. And if you don't get +1, start all over again. And more than likely you can't sell that because no one wants it. Why would they want something that potentially has lost a socket or, you know, can't get, or -1? You know, there's so many bad things that can happen. And so basically what he talked about is you could have it upgrade your character and you upgrade the slot permanently. And I thought that's fantastic. That's exactly what I was talking about a long time ago and I forgot to mention it in my video. Then you can't resell that. And you know, a big thing about Path of Exile is everything is sellable. Everything is a currency. And then all of a sudden that's not. So that was a really good point. I didn't think about that, which makes it harder to kind of suggest an ideal fix for GGG. Now I did warn you I was a scatterbrain, so I think I probably forgot to mention what you're watching is a Simulacrum +1, and like I said, that sort of sparked this whole video. It's only a +1, and my character barely managed to complete it, which is why I'm rebuilding my Lightning Herald stacker from the ground up. And interestingly, talking about Herald stackers, I think that's one of the biggest issues in this game right now. It's just so powerful. It's really quite easy to get going. I thought it was very complicated to start. I thought maybe I had to work on freeze chance, shock chance, you know, all this sort of stuff. Freeze build up, sorry. You don't. Just keep adding more damage. That is literally the answer. Just keep adding more damage and you obliterate the screen. It's kind of that simple. And then you take it to bosses, and you remember how I said I was building this character to be my mapper and not my bosser? All I got to do is click off cast on freeze, click on cast of shock, fire out 1,000,000 ball lightnings per second using lightning rods and orb storms, and the boss is dead. Max level. I'll show you a max level breach boss now, and it just doesn't take very long. And that's without the melting maelstrom flask, which if I get that, I can give myself basically infinite mana. It's not quite how it works, but essentially I will give myself enough mana to kill the boss before I run out of flask charges. So if I did that, I would be killing these bosses in about 2 or 3 seconds, I'm pretty sure. It's a bit ridiculous. So what the biggest problem in Path of Exile 2 is honestly 2 things, I think, actually. One is build diversity. It's nowhere near the level of Path of Exile 1, I will admit it. As someone who does prefer Path of Exile 2, I know there's quite a few of you guys quite shocked by that, but I do prefer Path of Exile 2. And the reason for that, and the reason in my opinion why Path of Exile 2 is so different, is, well, here you go, have a little Venn diagram. I think that's what it is called, right, the Venn diagrams. The point is, they've already got the Path of Exile 1 player base, and, you know, I've talked with many of you, and I've watched many other content creators that cover Path of Exile 1. And you are all so incredibly passionate about Path of Exile 1, that unless they do something absolutely horrific to their game, you guys are going to stick around and play their games. They've also got all these fantastic quality of life, you know, microtransactions with, well, I've recently actually started a guild, and I didn't realize I had to pay for the guild stash tabs, and I didn't realize how expensive they were. So we haven't got very many yet. I also don't have very many on my own account because they are expensive. I've really wanted to buy the Despair cosmetics, for example. I bought myself the head because I really can't stand half the helmets in this game, and I couldn't afford the rest of it. It's like $100 or something crazy for the whole skin. What I'm trying to say is with this Venn diagram, they've already got the Path of Exile 1 player base, and they probably want to do all these changes that they think would make, you know, a really cool game. And one of the things in Ben's video he kept saying is the combat in Path of Exile 2 is terrible. I can't remember the exact words. I really should not I should probably quote him word for word, so if I'm taking things a little bit out of context, I do apologise. I will link the original video, so I highly suggest you all go watch it. But he's basically saying the combat is terrible, you rely on one button, you blow up the screen, and he's not exactly wrong. When it comes to bosses, I stick one orb down, I fire out some lightning rods, and actually I found just spamming lightning rod over and over and over again is actually the most effective way of killing bosses. So I put orb storms down, I hold Q, the boss is dead. So it's kind of one button. He's not wrong. In Path of Exile 1, in even the content he was showing, he's pretty much spamming one button. The other thing in Path of Exile 1 is you just spam flasks like absolutely crazy. You know, you have like 4 flasks you are just permanently chugging to give yourself buffs during combat, and I just found that to be quite... I'll be honest, I found that quite dull. And I also found the mapping in Path of Exile to be quite dull, because you'd usually find 1 or 2 or 3 very specific maps which were just better. They were more linear, they were more dense, they were more packed. It was just better XP, better currency per hour than other maps. And with the Atlas, you're kind of forced to run maps that maybe you don't want to. I do think maybe they should add like some sort of culling thing, where maybe if you run a certain maps, you can build up something where you can just instantly complete a map. Or even just create a new bridging node or something. Because sometimes there are nodes that you cannot reach, which I think is probably a bug. Well, it's obviously a bug, but it's obviously going to try to get fixed. But then you've got maps like Augury and Maya, which are just abysmal. And to the point where I will just go around them. If I have to complete 3 more maps, I'll go around them. But where I was trying to get to, I warned you as a scatterbrain, I'm really, really sorry. The thing I was trying to make at with Path of Exile 2's combat is it's incredible. It is actually incredible. But it's just so much of it is wasted because he's right, you just press one button. But what they've built is the most impactful, meaningful and heavy sort of combat I've ever felt in an ARPG. Everything you do feels like it's got weight behind it, feels deliberate. And I think the fact that they really hammered home, look, mobs will trap you. You cannot just dash through them and dash in between them. Not just saying that, I've seen a new, well it's not new, but I've seen a Temporalis blink build that has this cast on dodge and just blows up the screen. I think they probably thought Temporalis is going to be like this really hard to get unique that only a handful of players are ever going to be able to get hold of, because it's kind of just broken and it's just probably the best item in the whole game, to be honest. Going back again to this sort of Venn diagram is, with Path of Exile 2 they really wanted to work on something new. They wanted a sort of new gem system, a new passive tree. Because at the moment, Path of Exile 1 is just not approachable for new players, in my opinion. You know, you hear these stories of people bricking their characters because they chose a few wrong passives and now they've gone down a wrong route, or you know, in the passive tree in Path of Exile 1, I will be honest with you, I never managed to make a single successful build. I always did something that ruined it. I always had to follow a build in Path of Exile 1. And I remember speaking to a friend that was getting into Path of Exile 1, and he was like, nope, I'm going into this game blind. I will not look up builds, I will not look up gameplay. I'm pretty sure he quit after like Act 2. It's just not approachable for new players, the way that Path of Exile 2 is. They've simplified what needs to be simplified, but unfortunately, whilst doing that, they simplify things that they really shouldn't have done, like the crafting. I never could understand the crafting very well in Path of Exile 1. I understood how it works, but I never could get the hang of how to do it. I think you need a lot more knowledge than I had on all the different substats. And I remember when I was playing during the heist, I think it was the heist league, I went for a Toxic Rain Archer and I paid someone a lot of currency to build me a very specific bow. And that's all he, you know, he had a base, off he went, used some mechanic from some league, delve or can't remember what it was. It's like some weird like alien plant thing, but you used to get these modifiers. I think you could save them, and that way you could just chuck an item in and apply that modifier to the item. It's something like that. I've taken part in quite a lot of Path of Exile leagues, but whenever I got really deep into the end game, I just didn't enjoy the mapping. I remember on a Toxic Rain Archer is where I really got into it, and in fact I made most of my currency doing the heists. They were fantastic. And it's stuff like that which I want to say with Path of Exile 2, that a lot of people are saying that there's a lack of content here. I think one of the things that they should do first is, you've got Trial of Chaos, you've got Trial of Sekimas, make an even harder version of them. Like the Uber bosses. You know, I think there are Uber bosses in Path of Exile, right, where you can fight an even harder version of the bosses. I think that's what we need. I think we need Uber versions of them, but even Uber versions of Trial of Sekimas and Uber Sekima and Uber Chaos, where the whole thing, you go through it. But I think they'd have to make it more entertaining than that. Hang on, someone wants to buy a ring for 2 divine. No way, I'm not saying yes to that. I gotta say, Breach is just... That's actually another really interesting point I wanted to make, actually, and I'm so glad this guy tried to trade me. Breach is just better than everything else. Or at least maybe from what I've got so far. Breach is just better than everything else. Breach rings are, in my opinion, the best in slot ring. The gloves are pretty damn common. Breach splinters, you can get... I've been getting literally 300 in about 4 or 5 maps at the moment. I've done 3 runs today of the final boss. So Breach is way too good, or everything else is way too bad. And I think Breach was supposed to be really, really hard to do. And I say that because when I was working on my Summoner Sniper build, Breach was impossible unless I went down the SRS route. But the whole point of that build is I really want to be different. And then I know I'm playing a Herald stacking archer, you know. How generic could I have gone, right? From trying to be, you know, using snipers physically and just using snipers to Herald stacking. So far I think I spent 40 divine and I can clear almost all content. But I wish I couldn't. I think that's what it is. I wish I couldn't. I think for what we have, for how long the game has been here, and I know in Ben's video he kept saying like, we've seen no changes in 2 months. We've seen quite a bit. And in fact, a lot of it, as I think Lily also said, was bad. They started going on this nerf spree, you know. I think a lot of the early nerfs were actually just bug fixes. You know, SRS was even more coming back then because they gave you Grim Feast stacks. And I remember Diablo 4 when it came out, I was like, this game is great. I'm really into this. I'm enjoying this. And I was playing Druid, so I was doing hardly any damage until I got to Endgame, where I was doing ramping damage to the point where I was killing world bosses solo in like 20 seconds. So Diablo also had the same sort of problem that Path of Exile is sort of struggling with, which is just the characters are too powerful. And I don't know how they're going to fix that, because Diablo obviously tried, pissed off a lot of players, but Diablo kept nerfing things back to back to back, and it's really, really annoying. I remember, you know, I wanted to try a new build, so I re-rolled. I was using my XP farm, they nerfed it. Then I was playing my Druid again, then they nerfed my Druid. Started leveling a new character using a new XP spot, they nerfed it. Everything was a nerf, and that's not what we want with Path of Exile, so I'm glad they've decided to stop nerfing things for a bit and just, you know, maybe take a little bit of a step back and let things breathe. But you know, they are doing all sorts of things. Obviously they added checkpoints everywhere, and fair play again, something Ben said that is pretty fair. If you have to add checkpoints to your maps, and you're getting a lot of people asking to add checkpoints to your maps, the fundamental problem isn't the lack of checkpoints, it's your maps. And I did say in my endgame review that actually the map sizes, even during campaign, you know, Act 2, bit too big. Act 3, way too big. Going into maps into this, they might not be so bad about the size if they were a little bit more linear. I'm trying to think of a really good map, like Seepage, I guess. I guess most places connect to each other in Seepage, but you know, going all over the place. Augury is just horrible. I will not run Augury. But I still prefer this system to only buying maps on Path of Exile that were good for me. And I don't think I covered towers yet, did I? Towers suck. I think I was a little bit nicer than this in my endgame review, but I did also say in that one that towers, they're pointless at the end of the day. Adding the precursor to it and buffing these shiner nodes, that's awesome, but the tower itself, I mean, all of that should be skipped. You could just make it like a boss, I guess. Just make it any go in there as a boss. Okay, so whatever tier you stick in, you get that tier boss, you get that tier rewards. Higher tier rewards. And this is what I was saying in my other one, where the tower itself should provide rewards, and then the precursor tablet is one that you specifically can choose what extra rewards it applies. So I think one of the ones I said is, for example, res add 1 additional modifier. I think towers should add stuff like that. It will speed up the towers, it'll make it more rewarding to find them. Maybe I was a little bit too praising of Path of Exile 2's endgame. I think, like I've said, I think a couple of times now, for how long it's been out, for it being early access, and it is early access, anybody saying it isn't early access, well, one, you're you're wrong. It's early access. But 2, if you're saying it's not early access, that's just complimenting how good of an early access it is. But I mean, the performance of the game alone is all I need to tell you for early access. You know, it's half the acts, half the classes, half the ascendant, or 2/3 of the ascendancies. Little tiny bit rushed. I think they probably were like, we need this out for Christmas or around Christmas time. I think for what we've got, for how long it's been out, I think they are doing great and they are working a lot on changes. I still think that every pinnacle boss in the game should only drop good uniques. And I know it wasn't like that in Path of Exile 1 either. I know Path of Exile 2 is clearly trying to be a different game with the way that supports work, the way that the gems work, the way that the combat is more deliberate. I am over the moon with Path of Exile. I think we need uber versions of the dungeons that aren't related to your ascendancy, it is just for farming currency. I don't know what exactly they can do about the market, because my original budget build is now more like, it went from you could do it on 2 div to I think now it's like 10 plus div, which sucks. But I don't really know what they can do about that. It's player driven, except obviously add in a trading system, so a proper auction house sort of system. It's an ARPG, just because it feels very MMO-like and there's a lot of MMO elements, it's not an MMO, so does it belong in the game? I would still say yes, because I want it, but I don't know. I've waffled on. I don't do unscripted videos, as you can probably figure out why, but every time I wrote scripts, it just felt like I wasn't giving you my true personal opinions. It wasn't just like off the cusp, I guess, so I'm sorry this is all over the place. I'm sorry it's a bit of a mess, but I just want to get my genuine thoughts and opinions out, and kind of further explain that, in my opinion, Path of Exile 2 has the best endgame for being early access and for it just coming out. Maybe I didn't touch Path of Exile 1's endgame enough, and like I said, Path of Exile 2 isn't necessarily aiming for the Path of Exile 1 fanbase, because they've got you. They want to get a new fanbase, and new players aren't going to get into Path of Exile 1 no matter what they add to the league. Well, obviously some people will, but it's got this reputation for being incomprehensible, too complicated, too easy to screw your character up, to the point where when they advertised the game, one of the big things they pointed out is they've added gold. You can respec for gold, and I can tell you, sitting on almost 10 million gold, I can respec my entire tree hundreds of times over, and trust me, I have done. They are really aiming for newer players, and they're not necessarily aiming for the older players. And obviously, Venn diagram, there is somewhere in the middle, and I do think they're going to do their very best to please both parties, but it's not going to be easy. So good luck, GGG. I'm not going anywhere. I absolutely love this game. That being said, Monster Hunter's coming out in a month, and I absolutely love Monster Hunter 2, so we are going to have to start splitting our time over multiple games. But I think I'm going to keep just uploading Path of Exile 2 content, and maybe I'll stream the Monster Hunter to start off with. Anyway, thank you for watching. Thank you for listening. I'm sorry I'm rubbish and rambly when I make non-scripted content, but I hope you enjoyed nonetheless. Bye bye.